Hello and welcome to The Molten Truth. I am your host, Zoe Michaels. And if you've been watching the first couple of recordings of these sessions, you know that The Molten Truth is about events in our life that have put us kind of through the fire. We've been, purified by hardship, adversity, or some kind of just something out of left field that made us change and go a new direction and maybe make our lives better, hopefully make other people's lives better. And so that's what the Molten Truth really is about. So today's guest is Laura Vosika. I hope I'm saying that right. And
Very close, Vosika. I think you got
Vosika. Uh, and So she is many things, but one of the most amazing things, and there were several to choose from. I'm just so impressed with what she told me about how she became an author and has this series, The Bluebells Chronicles. But I'm going to let her tell you her story, and I'm going to just let her take the stage from this point on.
So, do you want to start with the Bluebells Chronicles or with my life story?
Let's start with wherever you're comfortable. So you tell us.
All right. Well, I am best known, although I have about 15 or 16 books out, which include a short novel I co-wrote with my husband and a book of poetry and essays I put out with my husband. I've got a journal out. I've got a couple other things, a poetry anthology that I put together each year with other poets. But I'm best known for my time travel series to modern and medieval Scotland called The Bluebells Chronicles. And it is, I want to say, built on my own life, but that makes it sound like a time travel, which I don't.
How cool would that be?
Well, one thing I decided quickly in my research was you're insane if you want to time travel because a lot of historical periods were very ugly. Now, to be fair, I've heard that in a lot of, we tend to focus on the wars, but everybody wants to go to the exciting times. Well, the exciting times tend to be kind of bloody and brutal too. So this is the story of a modern day trombonist, and that's my life. I was a trombonist, majored in music, and played for a long time in semi-professionally in community orchestras, semi-professional orchestras, jazz bands, for ballets, for musical theater. And it was a lot of fun. I played for churches. I played for Easter Sunday, the day my daughter was due. So that was very interesting.
I bet it was.
Played in a trombone choir in a bar when I was very pregnant probably with the same daughter. I don't know why anybody wanted a trombone choir in a bar of all places, but it was fun. So anyway, the main character is a trombonist, and he is loud and arrogant and obnoxious, and he does whatever he wants. He thinks life is about having fun and partying. And it works pretty well for him because he's also very talented and a very good businessman. So he's turned this little Midwestern orchestra into this worldwide phenomenon, and he's making them a ton of money. So they're like, do we get rid of him and lose all this money? Or do we keep him and end up being sued by the women and by the hotels? And finally, his girlfriend has enough, and they're on tour in Scotland. And she abandons him in a medieval Scottish tower. Well, his counterpart in 1314 also has a bit of a fight with his betrothed, and he goes to sleep in the tower, and they wake up in the wrong centuries. And so now Sean, our modern day trombonist, is caught in 1314, just about 2 weeks before Scotland's greatest battle, the Battle of Bannockburn, where the Scots, the historians think they had about 5,000. They think the English had about 20,000. So we're talking 5-1. Plus, the English were much better equipped. They had real armor. They had big, massive war horses. They had lances, and the Scots, little more than a ragtag band of farmers. They were a little better than that, but not by much. They had leather armor. They were riding on these little animals called garons that are a little bit like today's Connemara ponies. They're actually extinct now. And so they were vastly outnumbered, but the Battle of Bannockburn turned into a complete rout of the more powerful force, the English. So that in itself is an amazing story, and I get really excited about Scottish history of that time. But anyway, in the course of being caught in medieval Scotland, Sean begins to realize that what he does really matters in life, and that life really has to be about more than having fun. And so it ended up being a one-book story that my sister read it, asked what happens next. And I said, well, he's kind of dead, so nothing happens. And I was so curious, why would she even ask that? That's an odd thing to ask, that I went back to reread the end. And I realized it was so clear in my mind that he had died from this horrible injury, but I never actually said he did. And I thought, wouldn't that be amazing if he actually survived this injury? And so he did. Because when we write, we're kind of, our own little God in our own little world. So he survived the injury by a little bit of a miracle. And then he spends some more time in Scotland. And by now, Neil, the medieval warrior, has made it back to his own time. So they're caught medieval Scotland together. And they hate each other because in 1314, pretty much everybody is Catholic. And they take their faith seriously. It's an interesting time because there was a lot of divorce and mistresses and things. And yet in their own way, they took their faith very seriously. And so here is Neil. He believes in chivalry and integrity and honesty and faithfulness to one woman. And these are just like, that's not fun, to Sean, that's abhorrent. And so it's the story of how they have to live as one person. So one of them always has to be in this hooded monk's outfit, pretending to be Brother Andrew. And this becomes a bit of a running joke as everybody, including Robert the Bruce, is making comments about this Brother Andrew who's always hanging around you, Neil. What's up with that? And so it was an extremely fun story to write. And there is a story of redemption in it. Sean's a very funny guy. He's got his good qualities and he's got his bad qualities. And that's kind of a tagline I came up with, that we find out, Sean's the bad guy, Neil's the good guy. But we kind of learn Sean really does have his good points that he can build on. And Neil finds out that he can be a little bit arrogant. He can be a little bit vain. He can be a little bit overconfident, which can get him into trouble. And so one of my taglines coming out of the book, which in a way I think pertains to the point of your podcast, is because how did I say this? Not everyone is all good and not everyone is all bad. And that pertains also to Angus, who is in modern Scotland and ends up being kind of the new love interest of Sean's girlfriend when Sean disappears for a long time and nobody knows where he is.
Right. Absolutely. So I just have to ask, because my mind goes there. Did your character meet William Wallace?
No, because William Wallace, and I think I remember the date accurately, he died in August of 1305. Mm-hmm. So he actually died 9 years before the Battle of Bannockburn. Okay. So what happened was, if you've seen any of the movies, what is it, The Outlaw King, and then there's another one.
One of them is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Braveheart. Braveheart. I'm so embarrassed. I based my original research on Braveheart, thinking they do their research. Oh my, I was so wrong. They didn't have kilts in 1314, and they've long since quit wearing blue paint. So I kind of jokingly say I had to take all my characters' clothes off and give them new clothes because they're all running around in kilts. I mean, I knew so little about Scotland when I started.
Same here.
But but Braveheart portrays Robert the Bruce as a little bit of a weasel. And I think that's unfair. And I can see how William Wallace himself might have been like, come on, man, pick a side. but it was a very complex situation because Scotland and England were just very intertwined.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the nobles and lords had land in England. And so just like any person with some wealth today, even though you're very wealthy by other people's standards, to you that's normal and you're afraid to lose it. And in that day and age, you weren't necessarily just going to lose a castle and all the rent from the fields. You might also be hanged.
Right.
Or if King Edward was in a particularly bad mood, he might pour molten gold down your throat. And most people just don't want to die like that.
No.
And so, but once William Wallace was executed in a very hideous way, that's when the Bruce sort of picked his side and said, you know what, I have to take a stand.
Yeah.
And I think he realized that they're just going to wear us down one by one. Either we're going to die fighting or we're going to die on our knees. And maybe if we fight, maybe we won't die. So 9 years after William Wallace, it was actually a fairly long time. That's when it all finally came to a head at the Battle of Bannockburn.
I appreciate that education because as interesting as that part of history is, it's just not one that I've researched yet. So I do appreciate that. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate that.
It's a fascinating era, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And at the time I was deep into it, I almost had to carry a warning sign. Do not ask me about medieval Scotland. You will be here for the next 6 days because it's so amazing.
You and I could have another couple podcast episodes about that. I am sure. I find it fascinating that, the music thing. I was refreshing my memory before we started the podcast, looking at your website, and saw that you were doing some work with your husband on another book that involves music. I forget the details of what it was called.
Yeah, it's called the Theology. Wow. It's called The Theology of Music. And it's kind of funny. When we first met online, he was gung-ho right from the start, like from the day he met me, I'm going to marry you. And he kind of wasn't giving me time to catch up. We're married now, so he won. But one of the first things we started talking about was that I had started this book called Theology of Music. And this, I hate to say it, is going back 11 years. We started talking about it, and he is a great intellect. And I realized this subject is so much deeper, and so there's so much to it that we need to do this together. And so we used to meet like every Monday night. We'd go to Green Mill. We'd get a giant pizza with like 24 shrimp on it. And they got to know us. So you're the people who buy the shrimp pizza. And then it had like everything else in the world on it too. And it was great. We'd have Long Island iced teas and work on this book. And it's based on the idea. I mean, you can find theology of almost everything. Pope John Paul II has theology of the body. There's theology of art. And it's basically about, from this subject, what can we know about God? And so we were digging into things, and I still have all the notes. We do need to get back to it. But we were digging into the science of music.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about, was the science of it. Yes.
Right. How sound waves impact our body. The cultural aspects of music, the fact that virtually no society in history has not had music. Every culture, every society, music is very central. And I think this was important to me because I grew up in a family where my dad's a military officer. Music just wasn't a thing. It was a frill. I was supposed to, at least this was my perception. I was supposed to do something important, like be a doctor, be a lawyer, own a powerful company or business, because serious people don't go into music. You'll never make money being a musician. And so I think in a way, to me, it was also development, growing to say every single culture, music is so central to life. It's part of birth, it's part of death, it's part of weddings, it's part of going to war, it's part of everything. Absolutely. And it's even sacred, I think, in almost every culture.
Mhm.
And so to me, that was kind of powerful to really dig into those cultural aspects.
Mhm.
And then to tie it back to the theology question, you know, obviously some people listening aren't going to believe in God, and that's fine. But to me, I do. And I believe that God designed us. And if He designed us in such a way that every culture in history
Mhm.
has music and has it so central to their life,
Mhm.
that tells us something about God. And it tells us something about what He designed us to be. We're beings who need music. And so
Absolutely.
we
It's
have
right
it.
there
So
in the
it's very
atmosphere, just
important.
with the insects and the birds. There's music around us
Yes.
every single day.
Yes. That's so true. And I live on a farm, so
You
I
have
get a
even
lot of
more.
that. Mhm.
There was a time when I lived out in the country, when I was married, and we had, what was it, goats? And you wake up every morning hearing "ma,
Oh my gosh.
ma."
That's
I loved
so
it, but
funny.
it was part of the music of being in the country and all
Yes.
those beautiful sounds.
Well, we have sheep, and you know, we've only had sheep for about 2 years. I had really never been near a sheep before. And so it's so funny to us. They're in the upper pasture now, which they can see our garage door from there. So we open the garage door, and it's hilarious because the female sheep, especially the one that I call Crinkles the Bold, because she goes, "Ma, ma," in this like deep voice, like at the bottom of the trombone register. And then this beautiful ram, he's all white, and he's got this big, beautiful chest hair and these beautiful, and he runs up and he goes, "Meh, meh." And we're like, come
That's
on.
totally reverse of what you would expect from a
It's
ram versus this.
right. But it's hilarious. And they'll march right up to the gate and they will let me know, you have not fed us today. In fact, you haven't fed us for 18 months. And I'm like, you are lying. I just fed you yesterday. But they shout at me and they demand. And then I bring the food and then they all go boing and run away like I'm gonna eat them, which to be fair, I am. But but they're
We're
sheep.
not
They
not
don't
supposed to
know
know
that.
that.
Right, right.
But they get so attached. A few years ago, I had just the most amazing opportunity with my family to travel to New Zealand. And we
Mm.
happened to stay at this, I don't know if you'd call it a hotel or like a Airbnb. It was like a combination kind of thing because
Hmm.
it was strictly speaking, it looked like a hotel, but it was right in the countryside. And the man had
Uh-huh.
sheep and llamas, sheep and llamas, I believe. Oh no,
Hmm.
alpacas.
Okay.
And so he had his very special call, and they'd come running for the food, and they would talk
Hmm.
to him the way that sheep do, and
Right,
it was
right.
just such a wonderful experience to be on that property and to have that interaction and have the opportunity
Yeah.
myself to actually feed the sheep because that's not something
Yes.
I've ever gotten to do.
Right.
But that was
I
for me the
I
best part of the whole trip.
right. I enjoy that, you know, and it's some of my friends, because we only left the Twin Cities about 3.5 years ago now, maybe closer to 4. And so I was very involved in music there. I went to poetry open mics. I was living a very suburban urban lifestyle, had never grown a vegetable or pretty much anything in my life, had
Mhm.
never really had much contact with anything other than cats and dogs. And so at first, some of my friends were asking me, you know, like, are you happy? You know, this is such a change. And I keep thinking, yeah, I'd love to have more time to write and to play music, but I love being out there with those sheep. And, you know, Crinkle's the bold, she's the aggressive one, but she's also the friendly one.
Yeah.
And so bit by bit, I'm getting more of them to eat out of my hands. One of them got sick. What was it? A thiamine deficiency. I forget what it's called. And about half the sheep who get that die. But I had a friend come running up the hill from our homesteaders group, and she helped me get the sheep prop back up so it wouldn't die of bloat. Vet came over. I had to learn immediately how to give a shot, an injection to a sheep. And I found out it's not that hard. But it was really interesting that she had to stay by herself in the shed for it was close to a week that I was giving her these shots 3 times a day, and I would sit there and feed her by hand. And she came out different. Like now she'll come up to me and she's friendlier now. And it's like she knows that I saved her life. And it turned out she was pregnant on top of it.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was really miraculous. Not only that she was in the half that survived, because half of them die with this condition,
Mm.
but that then she had this little baby a week or so after I let her back into the flock too. So it
And
was
that
a really
extra
neat.
special bond between you
Mhm.
two. That's so lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so neat when she just comes up and she has this like almost shyer. She's not as bold as Crinkles, but she has this almost shy look on her face like remember when we were in the shed together and you pet me and you took care of me, and it's so adorable.
Oh, that is. But, it's interesting thing about music, and it wasn't my intention that that was going to be the primary conversation
Mhm.
tonight, but I've been thinking about music a lot in recent weeks and months. And,
Mhm.
looking from the standpoint of the brain, comparing it to a computer, I feel like music is like a programming language.
Mhm.
And I was, experiencing a lot of things, writing music myself,
Mhm.
process my own issues and grief these last few months. And I stumbled upon a few things. One was, the idea of affected labeling, expressing verbally the things that are bothering you, helping you to
Mhm.
process it better and to neutralize those emotions,
Mhm.
but I stumbled upon, among other things, I was having this thing at work where people were spelling at me, and nothing annoys me more than people spelling their name at me, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
I
Spell
mean,
me
it
your
was just
name.
like JACKSMITH. Yeah, I know how to spell Jack Smith. Thank you. So I was getting annoyed 8 hours a day, almost every single caller, feeling the need to
Mhm.
spell their name at me. And I'm like, I've got to do something about this. This is driving me crazy. I don't want to be mad at work every day over something so
Right.
petty, right?
Uh-huh.
So I had seen an interview of Gabriel Karp. He wrote a book called "Don't Get Mad at Penguins." And
Okay.
so in his interview, he's explaining, because he's apparently the foremost authority on conflict resolution, and that's what his book
Okay.
is about: conflict resolution. And
Mhm.
so, in taking what I learned from him and his interviews and from his book, I used that to write lyrics for a song. Don't get mad at a penguin. And I
I
was
love it.
using it in the moment to help neutralize the immediate.
Mhm.
But I found that as I listened to it more, along with other songs, of course, but like for almost 3 or 4 weeks solid, every single day, multiple times a day, I was listening to the song intentionally to
Uh-huh.
neutralize those feelings of aggravation.
Uh-huh.
And then I reached a point where I didn't need to listen to the song. I was
Mhm.
already feeling that neutral. Penguin, it's okay. Don't get mad at a
Right.
penguin.
That's
Can't
great.
get mad at a cat for not barking. That's not what they're designed to do. These
Mhm.
thoughts. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just programmed myself out of that really negative thing. So that's where my
That's
thinking has been with the
right.
music.
Mhm. That's great. And we did something similar. Now, I can't say I was mad. I've always said having 9 kids is really, really
Ooh,
great for developing patience.
yeah.
I didn't have much patience when I had the first, and I finally learned, especially after one of them went. He only recently told me he didn't technically go down the stairs. He was doing something else he wasn't supposed to and fell and hit his head. He ended up being airlifted
Whoa.
across Puget Sound to a head trauma unit.
Right.
And worse yet, it happened the week after a medevac helicopter had crashed into Puget Sound and everybody on board drowned. So to see your 9-year-old son strapped to a board, I mean, like strapped down, couldn't move. I wasn't allowed to go in the helicopter with him. We lived in Bremerton, so I had to drive from Bremerton down the Tacoma Narrow Straits Bridge
Mm,
and up to Seattle, which is an hour drive. And I was
yes.
driving the whole way with the radio on, just terrified I was going to hear the news come on and say another medevac went down and your
Yeah, you
9-year-old
must have
kid
been
just
beside
it,
yourself.
it was probably one of the most awful nights of my life. And
Yes.
but you experience something like that And you can, I suppose some people can be traumatized by it, but my take was, you know what? Nothing else is really that big a deal. I've been through this horrible thing, and who cares if the dishes aren't done tonight? It just doesn't matter in comparison to that. Who cares? This is an interesting story. I was in a grocery store quite some time after that, and my cart accidentally, like literally just barely touched the cart of the woman in front of me. And she was very elegant, you know, clearly a businesswoman of some sort, gorgeous nails. And she turned around and looked down her nose at me and said, "Please do not touch my cart." And I was like,
Oh,
bite my tongue, bite my
that's
tongue.
a scene out of a movie that you would just be laughing at.
Well, and I just said, "I'm sorry." I
Yes.
swallowed it because there's a part of you that wants to go, "How dare you
Really?
talk to me like that?" But, there was that part of me that had long since said nothing else is that big a deal. So I just, I apologized, held my tongue. About 10 seconds later, maybe only 5, she turned around and she said, "I'm really sorry. I've had a horrible day and you didn't deserve that. I didn't need to get upset about that."
I'm so glad
And
she did that.
and that was such a powerful moment to me. And again, this is something that speaks to, I think, the point of your podcast. We choose how we get to react, and
True.
how we react might change how somebody else reacts.
True. That could have escalated had you reacted,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
you gave her a moment to consider what she
Right.
did. Yeah. And I would wager that had you had a further conversation, it may even have been about, maybe what had happened to her during that day that made her
Right.
react that way. It reminds me of that book that Stephen Covey wrote back in, I don't know, must have been the 90s, because I remember it from that, like the successful habits or 7 habits of successful people. I forget. But I remember the thought about the paradigm shift. And I bet that would have been the case. But anyway,
right.
I should let you talk.
That was the whole story. I never saw her again.
But how lovely that she did realize and felt the need to apologize for that reaction.
Right. Yeah. And it was a really powerful moment for me too, that, it pays to just hold your tongue and, realize maybe somebody is having a bad day. Maybe their dad just died. Maybe their house just burned down. You don't know what's going on in their lives.
Right. Choosing peace is never a bad choice.
Right.
Choosing to escalate, why make war? Choose peace whenever possible with people. There's just no better way, to my way of thinking.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we have time for it. I hope we do, but tell us a little bit about your life, because you have a big family now, but I think you also came from a big family.
Well, I have 3 sisters, so some people consider 4 kids a big family. I obviously don't, especially now. Yeah, so I came from it was just 2 of us, and then years later my parents had 2 more. So in that respect, it never really felt like a big family. My oldest sister, graduated young from high school, so she was off to college when she was 16. So I think we only had maybe 2.5 years that all 4 of us were at home before she left for college.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't much longer that I left for college. And I think my youngest sister she must have been 6. So they were like 6 and 9 when I left for college. So, it didn't feel like a big family. And so I grew up in the Air Force, moving all over the world, and settled in Minneapolis. As I said, my dad was an Air Force officer. And after that, I packed up, went off to Wisconsin, majored in music, got married very young, and moved out of town, and eventually came back. And so, or did you want to know the trouble spots? And
only if you care to share it. I will go with whatever direction you are comfortable. I'm trying to think of my notes here, because there was an element that led up in the story that led to you writing your books. You know, I remember having a note
Right.
that you searched for yourself. So
Right.
I'll
So,
let you go with what feels
and I
natural.
think that's a story that I'm only really starting to talk about mainly because I think it can help someone else.
Yeah.
So, yes, we were what was, if you read the alcoholic family literature, even though my dad could stop drinking every time, he wasn't a raging violent drunk or anything like that, but we had the dynamics of an alcoholic family where there is the golden child, there is the scapegoat, there is the I think they call it the mascot and the shadow child, and you could pretty easily see that in each one of us. And I got cast for the most part as the scapegoat. Every once in a while, somebody else got picked for that role, and then I was the golden child for a few days. But mostly I was the scapegoat, and I'm pretty sure I know what incident started that, but it's beside the point. That is where I got cast. And so I grew up with a lot of criticism, a lot of, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. And at one point, I had gone in, my uncle owns a construction company, and so I was told, you'll be working for him this summer, and your job is, after the construction is done, you sweep and clean everything very thoroughly so they can come in and lay the carpet. Well, I was constantly told that I do everything half-assed. I was told that all the time. And so I decided I'm going to do a really good job. There's not going to be a speck of dust left on that floor, because I knew that I was probably going to be told I didn't do a good job. So I did a great job. And then I was told, what took you so long? And I was 16 at the time. And that's when it clicked. This really isn't about whether I'm doing the right or the wrong thing. It's about somebody who is unhappy himself and kind of looking for a punching bag.
Yeah.
And your podcast is largely about how do we overcome these things, and right there, I'm going to say, I don't say any of this to badmouth anybody, but to say, I understand, because I know something of their backgrounds, why there was stress in our home. And so these things tend to come down through the generations, and you have to, number one, say, I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing not to be angry because I know you're hurting too. And I'm going to try and be the person it stops with. And easier said than done for many reasons.
Right.
But anyway, so I went from that to a relationship where I was also criticized a lot. I was found fault with. I was accused of cheating when absolutely nothing of the sort was going on.
Yep.
I was asked, why are you 5 minutes late coming home? The checkbook was being withheld from me, so I couldn't put gas in the car without running through the gauntlet of what I wanted the checkbook for.
Right.
And then he was mad at me that I set up my own bank account so that I could put gas in the car. And, I was told things like, oh, all my coworkers hate you. And I'm like, I've never even met them. Why would they hate me?
Right.
And so
it was the
again,
continuation of that pattern that you had experienced early in life.
And so after many years of this and a lifetime of just being told by all these people, and then it also has the wonderful effect that when somebody who should love you is telling other people how awful you are, they go, well, there must be something wrong with her. And then they start treating you differently too. And I spent years saying, I don't understand what I'm doing differently. I don't understand why people are treating me this way when I'm not doing or saying anything unkind or cruel or, strange. And I finally came to understand, and it took me well into my adult years when people came back and started telling me, oh yeah, so-and-so, every time you left the room would start saying negative things about you. And these were being said to my friends, to who knows all. And so what this has to do with how I started writing, after years of this, I really reached a point of just despair and even feeling suicidal. Just didn't want to get up in the morning. I just wanted to stay in bed all day because I felt so worthless and like I could never do anything right. And I had a friend in high school whose parent did commit suicide, and the effect that had on me in this situation was, you can't do that to your kids. It doesn't matter how terrible you feel. You need to find a reason to like life again. And so I did start looking into like on online programs, bucket lists, gratitude lists. And I started by finding 3 good things in every day, no matter how simple it was. You know, the snow coming down in the lights. And in Minnesota, we have a lot of snow coming down in the lights.
Without a doubt,
And,
I have been there.
Right. And it's incredibly beautiful. And I very quickly found out, you know what? It's not actually, even with everything going on around me. And it was even worse than that. There was a lot more going on that, you know, for time's sake, if nothing else, I'm not going into. But it was a very tough time. But I found out, even in a very tough time, you can find all sorts of wonderful things in the world. You get up and you see your 4-year-old tells you a joke, and you're like, oh, even though these horrible things are happening around me, that's the cutest thing ever. You know, I used to play Bloons Tower Defense with my youngest when he was like 3. And it's so funny to play a game like that with a 3-year-old. Like, there's no strategy. It's just, but it used to be our thing. And so, you know, that was a joyful thing. And so then I went to these bucket lists, and I found I couldn't even remember who I used to be. I used to be this person with all these interests, and now I was just like, I just need to get through the day.
Right.
And so I had started a novel years before. I had kind of been ridiculed as, oh, you think you're going to be on Oprah? And I was told, you know, you writing is causing all our troubles. So I set it aside for, I'm sorry to say, 15 years. But at this point, I finally said, you know, obviously I can't make anybody happy. My goal is to try and be a good mother to my children, to try and be happy no matter what's going on around me. And I always wanted to write a novel. So I said this to myself, and I know I didn't really mean it, but I said, okay, you write a novel, get it out there. And if you still feel like killing yourself, then we'll come back to the question. You know, and I said it. I think I knew deep down that at that point, if I still felt that way, I was going to find a second thing to do. But it did what it was supposed to. And I got into writing. I got into researching. I ended up saying, I joked about it. It was kind of true. I'm happier in my medieval dungeon where Neil spent quite a long time than in my real life. But there was an element of truth. But the process gradually meant that I was happier in my life. And I made these wonderful friends in the writing group I joined. I found out people who have never known the person who is bad-mouthing me, they like me, they respect me. And it's kind of a shock, actually, to see how much bad-mouthing someone can destroy relationships around them, and they have no idea what's going on. And, you know, so that's why I try and really focus not on who did what, but what do you do about it? Because we're all going to face difficult relationships, difficult people.
True.
And it's all about coming back to accountability. And as I used to always tell my kids, so-and-so is not going to face God for you. You are going to face God. And what do you want to have to say for yourself? Because he's not going to talk to you about anybody else. He's just going to talk to you about how you live the life that you were given. And so you choose how you're going to react. You choose if you're going to complain or if you're going to see the good in life. And that's what it all comes down to.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I really respect about the way that you handled, first of all, the criticism, you know, you didn't just dismiss it out of hand. you did try to improve. You did a self-examination to see,
Yes.
is there any merit to this? And then after doing the work, and you were still getting that criticism despite making improvements, doing the work, then you were able to say, decisively, okay, I've done my part. That didn't fix it, so it must be this situation.
Right.
And I truly respect that.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely vital. I think that we can never go to one extreme or the other. It is important if someone says, I don't know, you're always interrupting, not to just shout and interrupt them and go, no, I don't. I think it's fair to look at ourselves and ask, is this valid? And for me, it took, yes, I genuinely looked, okay, can I do better in all these ways? And finally understanding there's a pattern. And I was told at one point, I finally just said to one of the people in question, do I ever do anything right? Am I ever the one who's right? Are you ever the one who's wrong? And I was told, no, I'm never wrong. You're never right. And I'm like, okay, come on.
A narcissist.
Right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. There is no way, especially when I'm trying this hard to be in right relationship with people. There's no way I'm wrong every single time. And at that point, I kind of quit taking that person seriously and just realized, there's no dealing with this. There is no changing myself to a way that I'm not going to be criticized, because it really isn't about me.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard of the musician David Wilcox?
It sounds kind of familiar.
He's very similar in style to like James Taylor, Dan Fogelberg, that type of style. But he has this song called Breaking the Cup. And back in the late 80s, a friend of mine introduced me to his music. But his song, I was looking it up because you reminded me of that when I was listening. So when you saw me kind of stray away to my phone, like, where's that song lyric? But he talks about, this opening lyric, I try so hard to please you, to be the love that fills you up. I try to give you affection, but I think you've got a broken cup. And so it goes on explain what he did. But it ends with, so when you're tempted to rescue me, drowning in the quicksand up to the neck, before you grab my hand to save me, why don't you ask me if I've finished yet? You cannot make me happy, not when there's empty inside of me. But you can pull yourself right in here with me, because my misery would love your company. And it goes on about going to the waterfall to fill themselves both up. But anyway, it's an interesting song, because it comes down to, we have to take responsibility for our own happiness. We can't, we can pour our love into each other, absolutely. But ultimately, we have to take care of ourselves. We can't depend on someone else to do it for us.
Right. And, here's where that balance comes in again, too. I'm kind of bothered by a lot of the modern idea of take care of yourself first.
Yeah, no.
When it goes over into forgetting that we're here for each other. And so to me, I think it's always important to say, take care of yourself first, in the sense that you put on your own oxygen mask first.
Agreed.
And
absolutely.
So that you can take care of other people. And I think, obviously being a mother, it's vitally important to take care of our children to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
But I did find out some of these things going on around me, I don't want to say I couldn't. Maybe somebody could have kept putting themselves in these positions. One of the events was absolutely humiliating. Somebody just screaming at me in front of the entire family over Christmas dinner. It was so humiliating. Closest, I'm not a crier at all. I think if a bear ripped my arm off, I probably would have a stiff upper lip and go, oh, that really hurt. But I'm not going to cry. And this, I practically cried in public. And I just finally reached a point of, I don't think I can be a good mother to my children if I keep putting myself under that kind of stress. And moreover, if they see me letting people treat me like that over and over, one day they're going to treat me like that, because I taught them that I will allow that. And so that was a situation where it would have been nice for the kids to keep bringing them to these events.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, I can't,
Right.
I cannot allow, I have to take care of myself in this instance because it's going to affect all of us.
Absolutely.
Not going affected us too, but I think less,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I'll never know, but I do believe that had I kept going, I believe my kids would have seen that mom allows herself to be treated like that over and over and over. So I guess we can too. So
Or
in that instance, yeah, go
they
ahead.
could allow themselves to be treated that way.
That too. Mm-hmm.
You would have taught them that it was normal to be treated that way, and so if, when someone disrespected them, treated them that way, they would
Right.
imitate
Or
you in
that,
way.
I think one thing that's often said in situations like that is, oh, that's just so and so. That's just how they are, as if you should just accept it. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just how you are. That needs to change if you want me in your life, because I can only take being kicked in the stomach so many times before, I have internal bleeding and I'm dead.
Right.
Or,
Well, it's
however
like
you want
saying,
to use
"Here,
it.
have some wine and here's some arsenic."
Right, right. That's just who I am. I just like to put arsenic in people's drinks, and I don't know why you don't accept that. Well, because I'll be dead.
Yeah, it's toxic. We don't touch
Right.
toxic things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you have any advice or any additional thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
Um, you know, I think just recapping the things I've said, you need to take responsibility for your own happiness. You
Mhm.
need to consider, who was it? Dennis Prager used to always say happiness is a moral obligation. And that's actually somebody much, much farther back than him said it. It's kind of ancient wisdom. And I wish I could remember who. But I think it's so true. When I think about people I've been around who aren't happy, they're making everybody else miserable. And at a certain point, that's tearing everybody else down. And, like a doctor says, do no harm, or in my Christian worldview, you don't hurt other people.
Mhm.
And the fact that I'm unhappy about a lot of things doesn't really excuse me hurting other people.
Right.
And so, at that point in my life, that's why I had to realize, my stress over this is hurting my kids and I have to change for their sake. And so I think focusing on the end is a huge thing too. Or as I once read, be the author of your own story.
Yes.
When you look ahead to, we're all going to die. When you look ahead to your funeral,
Mhm.
what do you want to be happening? Do you want there to be just one passerby who came in so you wouldn't be buried alone because everybody hates you because you were so negative and critical and controlling and complaining?
Yeah.
Or do you want there to be people there who are saying, we had these wonderful memories, we did these wonderful things, I miss her. And then you better start living your life accordingly. And what other people are
Absolutely.
doing really isn't going to matter in the end. How you behaved is what's
Exactly.
going to matter in the end.
Absolutely right. Even down to your choice of who is around you.
Mhm.
Cutting off the toxic association, surrounding yourself with
Right.
positive the way you did, setting that wonderful example for your kids to be respected by the people around you. I mean, you are a
Yep.
living testimony to what we should be doing to take care of ourselves, to be healthy and sound in mind.
Right.
Well, I really appreciate you taking your time out tonight to be with us. Thank you so much.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. I did note your website, bluebellschronicles.com.
Mhm.
Any additional places people should look for your books or for your work?
Well, lauravosika.com will take you to the same place. And let's see, I'm on YouTube at Harpwriter and at booksandbrews.com. And I am at booksandbrews.net, which is my podcast where we interview authors and pair drinks to their work, which is a lot of fun.
I love
And
that.
yep. And then you can go to glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com where you can see our adorable sheep, including the one who trampled me a few weeks ago. He's in our freezer now and he's really tasty. And so I guess he had good cause to trample me. He knew it was coming. But you can see our sheep. They're American black bellies and St. Croix, which are really beautiful sheep. They're all white and they're just gorgeous. And then when they breed together, their babies are adorable. They're like cinnamon and cream. They're so cute.
Oh.
And then we have New Zealand white rabbits and chickens. I don't take many pictures of the chickens, though.
I get it. Although a friend of mine dearly loves chickens.
Mhm.
I could tell you stories, but we don't have time for the story.
Right.
But she does love their chickens.
Yeah, they are funny. I get a kick out of them.
Yeah, they're no doubt about it. But very good. Well, I will make sure to take note of that and put it in my blog. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.